Hi, I'm Dean Charolta Takac, and I'm very excited to talk to you today about pandemic, epidemic, and plague in ancient Greece. Let me start with the nouns. What's the difference between them? Pandemic comes from the Greek pan, which means all, and demos, which means people. So something that befalls all people. And as we know from today, a pandemic is a global affair. It is a contagion that goes all across the world. Epidemic comes also from the Greek. It starts with the preposition epi, upon, on, above, and again the word demos, people, something that comes onto or upon people. And when people start talking about epidemics, they mean that it is something that is in an area, so it's not global. And we also use the word plague. It comes from the Greek plaga, which means a blow. It's also in Latin, the same word plaga. The two languages are related. They all come from the Indo-European, just like English, Russian, German, and so forth. So Latin plaga actually means stroke and can also mean a wound. Usually when we talk about plagues, we talk about the bubonic plague, for example. So these are serious infections that start with rodents and then are transmitted to humans. It is an epidemic disease with a high death rate. So let us situate ourselves. So we're actually moving from the United States to what is the Mediterranean basin. So you can see in the middle here a big body of water. That's the Mediterranean Sea. And to the left, we have the Atlantic Ocean. And then Europe starts. And we start with Portugal, Spain, France, and then we move into Switzerland and so forth. And then you end up at the Black Sea region. And south of that, so let me just get my marker here. This is what the ancients called Asia Minor, which is today Turkey. And we have another, the part of the Mediterranean Sea, a lot of islands here between Turkey and Greece. And the focus of this lecture today is Greece. Okay, I want to point out a couple of important islands: Sicily, Crete, and Cyprus, and also another body of water, the Black Sea. And here we will also eventually talk, when we talk next week, about Rome and Italy. Here are the islands of Elba and Corsica. I'm sorry, this is Elba over here, Corsica and Sardinia. Okay, we'll talk about Byzantium, Constantinople, which is today Istanbul. We have also in the Mediterranean basin, of course, Africa, and particularly if we look here, North Africa, which was part of the Roman Empire. Okay, so everything from Morocco to Tunisia and going into other North African countries, Libya, Egypt, here with the Nile and the big Nile Delta, and then what we nowadays call the Near East. Okay, we have Israel, Lebanon, and Syria. Alrighty, so we situated ourselves. Pulling up the next slide. And here we focus on ancient Greece. A couple of things I want to point out. Athens here. And this peninsula is called the Peloponnese. And you have Crete here and Rhodes. This is, of course, Turkey here. And this area the ancients called Ionium. Here you have Ilium, Troy, Nowadays it's called Hissarlik. And this little entryway is called the Hellespont. You go then into the Propontis, and up here, as I said before, previous slide, Constantinople, into the Black Sea region. And here, mainland Greece, the northern parts of Greece. As you go further north here, you would go into Macedonia and along the coast to Albania and eventually Croatia. And then you go around back to Italy. Here is the island of Ithaca, which we will talk a little bit about today with Odysseus. This is the birthplace of the hero Odysseus, famous town for the ancients where you had the Olympic Games, Olympia. We will hear about Sparta, the home of Menelaus, Argos, Mycenae here, which we won't see, but we'll learn about as well, where Agamemnon is from, the brother of Menelaus, the leader of all Greeks when we talk about the Iliad and the Odyssey. And one more important place for the Greeks is the mountain town of Delphi. It is an oracular site. This is where folks went to hear the oracle speak the words of the god Apollo. So it's the famous place of worship of the god Apollo, whom we will learn as well today when we look at the Iliad. A little bit of historical background. We really come into the story of ancient Greek history with the Iliad, and what we need to know to understand this all better is a little bit of historical background. The early and middle Bronze Age is from 3000 to 1600 BCE. What we see in this period is the appearance of civilization. What do we mean by that? We seem to see some organized ways of living together. There are farmers, there are cults that are around farming that has to do with the fertility cycle of the earth. That is when the earth produces crops that people can use, eat, and store. And when you store something, you start writing down what you have. So this is what we talk about civilization. It has something to do with having records of what you own, and eventually records, artistic records of what you think, what you explore, and what you create. When we talk about the early Middle Bronze Age, we actually talk about the Minoan culture that appeared on the island of Crete, which I showed you in a previous slide. And in the period between 2200 to 1450, we do see the construction of palaces. So that speaks to the organization of people, and really a society that is divided, as you can see on the slide here, into kings and priests, warriors, and the farmers, people who work the land, the producers of food. These people at one point were fused with people that came from the East, so-called Indo-Europeans. So what we know about Minoan culture is we know that from writings, which is called Linear A, which isn't Greek and therefore isn't Indo-European. But at one point, Indo-Europeans arrived on Crete and brought with them domestic horses and the language from which we get Greek. and Latin and Gaelic. That's the Celtic languages. We get the Slavic languages, the Romance languages. So it's a huge language group. So that's the early part of Greek history. So there is fusion going on as the culture is created. So just to show you one more time, this is the island of Crete here. So the kind of southeast of the Peloponnese, and also geologically, Crete actually sits at the top of the European tectonic plate and the African plate. So it's just sitting on top of those two. And interestingly enough, this is where two different continents come together. And also, of course, different people, different cultures, different civilization. It is I would call it a location of transmission, so something between that creates new things. Around 1600 BCE, a cataclysmic event brought about the end of Minoan civilization. Again, the Minoan civilization is connected to the island of Crete. Let me get my little arrow. It's actually a circle. I'll show you Crete here. And the greatest the excavation of the Minoan civilization you can visit today is actually at the city of Knossos. And this event was an eruption of a volcano, which was the volcano at Thera, which is today's Santorini. Let me go to the next slide. And here you have Santorini. And you can see that what the circle of, or the cauldron here, the cauldron, I mean this area here. So you can see the eruption of this volcano that just took out this whole mountain top and left behind a beautiful island with a gigantic hole in the middle. Here you have another picture of this. You can just imagine the mass of stone that flew into the atmosphere with this eruption. And once the Minoan civilization slowly faded, a new one appeared, and it appeared on the Peloponnese. So let me get this, my circle again. So the Peloponnese is this peninsula here of Greece, and the area where we see activity is what is called the Argolith and Mycenae here, and which you will find, which you will learn more about, Mycenae, Argos, and so forth. So it's kind of this region here. The Mycenaean age is between 1600 and 1150 BCE. It's really named after the city of Mycenae. It is the ascendancy of mainland Greece. There were kings who replaced the Minoan civilization in Crete. They had a language, it's called Linear B because it was written on a line. And like Linear A, which was found or unlike Linear A that was found on Crete, Linear B was eventually deciphered by a British scholar named Michael Ventris, who came out of the Second World War and cracking the Enigma machine of the Germans. And the decipherment happened in the early 1950s, and it became clear that Linear B actually was Greek. It's the site of Mycenae, the site of Sparta, are connected with the story of the Trojan War, and this heroic legend And eventually also the palaces of Mycenae were destroyed around 1150 BC. So it kind of coincides with what we think is also the destruction of Troy through earthquakes and warfare as well. So this is all from archaeology. So let me go to the next slide. So here you have an aerial picture of the palace complex of Mycenae, and also an artistic rendering of it. So what we see is really a complex structures of houses and a wall. So it's a walled city. And here to the left, you have a Linear B tablet. This is also from the Peloponnese, from a town called Pylos, which was connected to Nestor, the great, really old, very powerful leader of the Greeks, who was also known for his amazing ability to give speeches. So here you have the tablets as they were found, and they're clay tablets, and as I said, with this Linear B, and you can really nicely see the lines, and then the script that was decoded. And what was written on those tablets? Mostly they were inventory rolls, what people had stored, how many amphorae of oil, how much grain, and so forth. So not literature as we would think, but more or less accounting rolls of what people owned. So back to our map. Okay, so I talked about the Argolith, so the city of Argos, the city of Mycenae, the city of Tiryns and Sparta, and we will also, at one point, I will point out Olympia as we go on, and eventually, as the Minoans faded, Mycenaeans will fade, and we'll move over to Athens. So just keep the map in your head as we move along. I want to just quickly tell you a little bit about Heinrich Schliemann, and you'll have access to the slideshow and you can click on the links. Heinrich Schliemann was a German entrepreneur, and he made a lot of money, and as a child he read the Iliad and the Odyssey, and he got so into these two epics that he decided when he had money he would go and start finding this what he thought of more like this amazing magical places of antiquity. And he actually bought the hill in Mycenae from the authorities. At that time they were the Ottoman authorities. He bought it and he started to excavate, and he found what he called the Mask of Agamemnon, and I'll show it to you later. Then he also went to what is today Turkey, and kind of located ancient Troy, which is today Hisarlik, and he started again excavating, and he found treasures as well. And so he's really someone who translated the myth of the Iliad and the Odyssey into archaeological data in his head, and he went out and was able to find things. He wasn't a trained archaeologist, so he made a couple of mistakes, or many mistakes, because he had it set in his head what he wanted to see. So for him, myth was history, and that we would call historicism.